Hello, hello. Welcome to the stream. As you can see, today's guest is Karu. Say hi, Karu.
Hello, hello.
As with Boffin, most people haven't heard his voice before, so now you can sort of accept the voice behind the avatar. Welcome to the Sunday stream. And the topic of today's stream came about from a discussion with Karu, and I think even with Boffin, just generally having a discussion about not just compromise, but fair give and take, and realistically, how can I put it, relating to another person rather than idealistically trying to relate or trying to date out there or trying to understand other people. I often feel there's a disconnect, or people have much more problems than they would otherwise have if they kind of relaxed and treated people a bit more realistic and not as idealistic. And I asked, I did a call out for a few questions for today's stream. And surprisingly, I didn't get very many. I'm not sure why, but I did get a couple of very interesting ones. So that was good. Namely, Karu's one, which is why also I wanted him on today's stream to talk around this subject. And we talked a little last night about it. And we wanted to share and further the conversation with you guys. And it's not so much that I had strategies going into dating, and I would have strategies by which to navigate arguments, or I would have strategies by which to, with the theoretical future girlfriend, I would have these skills to sort of Jedi trick her out of arguments and learn how to step around and the minefield and things like that. It wasn't that at all. And I suppose what came out of the discussion between Karu and I was he asked a question in the community tab, which was a very interesting one. Perhaps Karu, you can actually ask the question yourself, and then we can talk around the subject and mention some of the points we were talking about earlier.
Well, it's a multi-point question, and I thought it would be interesting if both you and your current partner would be able to reply to them. The first one was, if you could change 3 things about yourself that would make you a better partner, what would they be and why? And the second one, if you could change 3 things about your partner that you think would make them more compatible with you, what would they be and why?
Yeah. And
I think these. Go
ahead. No, you go ahead.
I just think that these provide a bit of an insight into how well you know both yourself and your partner, what their likes, what their dislikes are, and if there happen to be things in the relationship that cause friction, these might give a little mirror into what's actually going on there and the awareness that you may or may not have.
Yeah. It was actually a really good question. And you asked it midweek, which gave myself and Stephanie a bit of time to talk about it. And by the way, she complimented you. She said that was a 10 out of 10 question. So she really, really liked it. So that probably gives you
That's very sweet.
So that probably gives you an insight into a little bit of the kind of direct, unflinching and interesting sort of conversations I have with her. I can talk to her about anything. None of this is a finger pointing at her or judging her. It's an interesting question about these kind of dynamics. And that's what I really appreciate about it. But I thought it was a great question, and she thought likewise. She thought it was great. And we spent the last couple of days just in a fun way every now and then trying to come up with the 3 things. And what we both found was we were trying to find 3 things to answer your question. So we were creating almost like going into our own psychology and where we had failings as individuals and and so on and so forth. And we're really trying to find faults. And I'm not saying that we don't have moments where we don't see eye to eye and we have to get each other on the same page by explaining things and making the other person understand. But at some point, we sort of said, hang on, this question is about us as a couple, what we need from each other. It's not about my own personal goals or how I would like to personally improve. This is relationally. And that's what this question was that was so interesting. And last night, I talked to you a little bit about it. And I said that, we really don't have any problems as such. We get along really well, like good friends. We like hanging around each other all the time. I sleep better than I used to before. And there's just a lot of comfort, an ambient comfort about us. And so, and if there is a question mark, it's usually that the other person is having a difficulty getting the other to see the point of view. Say, for instance, I'm explaining something and she might be listening and trying to understand, but she's not getting exactly the perspective I'm trying to get her to see. She's interpreting it incorrectly, like through her own lens. And the discussion is getting each other on the same page. But there's never oh, I better not say this, or I better avoid a topic like this because she doesn't like that, or she gets offended. These topics are off bound, or women are like this, so I won't discuss this. There's never been any of that. So I think I was discussing with you that the initial vetting process, or even before that, getting to know her platonically as a person, because I never wanted to date her from the start, and neither did she. We both lived on other sides of the world, and it was off the table, and it was just a simple correspondence between us that grew into this because we just became more and more interested and grew closer together as personalities, wanting to speak to each other, and one thing led to another. It seems cliche, but that's kind of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, to be fair, when you gave me your answer and after the discussion that we've had last night, I was both surprised and a bit disappointed with your answer. Not not necessarily because of what you've explained to me and what you've said thus far, but in truth, it does seem a bit like a fairy tale. Like the compatibility is just so good that we only have very minor things, and usually they're either miscommunications or somebody's not comfortable at the moment saying something, and then it quickly gets resolved. No, I don't want to be like one of the people in your comment section that's going to say, well, this is the honeymoon period, so everything is going to be fine for the next whatever time period. And then you're going to see, I think that's a pretty scummy thing to do. But at the same time, you've mentioned that you've lived alone for a very long period of time, and so has her. So to me, not having that type of friction, let me build a scenario because it's going to be easier to understand. Let's say you work a pretty demanding job, so a lot of the time you're away from home. A lot of the house is your partner's domain. And now because you've retired or whatever, you're spending all of your time at home. Naturally, this person is now living with somebody in the house, so they're not used to having the house to themselves. Things get moved around. Maybe you leave your clothes hanging all over the place way more often than she'd like, and so on and so forth. So the idea of there not being any type of friction in any part of your life, to me, was just baffling. In fact, you've mentioned a couple of things, and they were all positives. Some of which, I'll be honest, made me pretty envious. So, does she have a sister my age, or?
No, she has a sister a couple of years older. We went to her wedding earlier this year. We flew to Holland. No, she's taken Karu.
Well, I doubt she's a bimbo or a goth either, so not for me.
No, but like I think Dutch people have a cliche of being very direct, and they're yeah, some people find it confronting, or they get triggered by them, but I actually found her very comforting. I found the clarity of her directness and her never wavering, not changing from day to day. And if she did, it was be a mood, and she would tell me she's in an off mood. I never have the conversations with her, what's wrong, nothing. That never happens and never will because of her character. And she's direct, but some people would say, well, there's a difference between being rude and blunt and not caring and not having empathy. She's just matter of fact, polite. And you're used to, when you live in the West, you know, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You have to kind of cartoonishly have velvet gloves with children, and you want to have adult conversations where people don't take you the wrong way. Like, for instance, you and I always thought, why is it so hard to have a refreshingly open conversation where even if one person isn't the same as you, they can directly tell you what they think and who they are, and they're not insulting you. So I have no reason to get offended, and I don't. But it seemed like everyone I dealt with, especially chicks on dates, you had to wear velvet gloves and treat them like a 5-year-old that wanted a pony. Otherwise, they would fly away or be offended, and someone would point their finger at you, and you were in the wrong. So I just found the matter-of-fact, unromantic directness of her, and I think it's common with Dutch people. And I asked her, and she said, yeah, most women are like me. You know, they vary. Like, you know, she's much more of an introvert than I am. We're both homebodies. But most women, she always thought on YouTube and social media, people were performing and they were amping their personalities up. And I said, no, they're the extreme cases, but most people are really weird that way. Most people put on a front. And she took it with a grain of salt, but over time, she's actually seen that that's the case, especially I would guess living with me here in Australia in the West for the last year. So yeah, it's I think it's got to do with her upbringing, her culture, but most importantly, you talked about the being envious. When we try to answer your questions about where we could improve and keep it between us, not a personal one, not like where I would want to improve just for myself. And obviously, if I improve for myself, the residue effect would probably be healthy too for her in our relationship. But there really wasn't much at all. And I was asking her to be completely honest. And look, her words, not mine. She really, a personality trait, she can't find anything wrong with me. And that's not to say I'm perfect. I would say that's more to do with how compatible we are. And to touch on another point you talked about, I think when we grew close and we wanted to start a relationship and we wanted to go further and we wanted to talk things out and I think with us, there is always this ongoing choice to want to take care of us and the other person, that we never put ourselves first. Yes, we've been living alone for a long time, and we were very selfish because you have to be to take care of yourself and navigate your own world and habits and routines. But when you're with someone you find that's almost like a version of you outside of you, albeit in a different personality, but they can relate to you in the way you always wanted to be treated and listen to you and understand you and all that. There's a real intent between the two of us to want to talk things out, to not treat each other badly, to look out for each other. It's not a me against her, me looking for time away from her. It is always looking out for the other person. So there's a real wanting to take care of us kind of mentality that I've never actually had before. Something always stopped me beforehand. There was a real feeling of, I'm on my own and so is the other person, and we have to learn to be together and respect each other's boundaries. There is almost, I'm never being aware of her boundaries because I can say and do anything around her. So she's much less like a person I have to, like a formal person I have to respect as a woman to get along with her because I find her attractive. She's exactly my kind of person, and it's kind of effortless, so you don't fight. I don't have to navigate. All I do is talk things through with her when we're not exactly on the same page, so I can explain myself and she does the same thing. Does that kind of paint a picture for you?
It does, and surprisingly enough, it's warming my heart. Something that I didn't think would happen anytime soon, and I'm a bit uncomfortable to say the least.
Yeah, look, I think the intent of both of us, where we're calibrated, where our perspective is when we're together, and we're together all the time, and we enjoy spending time with each other. So I am always aware of her and care about her, and not to denigrate her. Guys would understand this, right? You know, when you have a dog you love and you're taking care of it and it takes care, like there's this ambience of, there is nothing wrong between us. I understand its nature. I understand her nature. We complement and understand each other. She's different to me, but where the important values lie, where we're both homebodies. Yes, I'm slightly more an outgoing person, not much, but I need to, say, see my family more or go out, and I enjoy going grocery shopping more. She'd be fine just staying at home, and I do the grocery shopping, and she'll be fine being locked in four walls all the time. She's fine going out, but she doesn't have that need. I actually have a bit of a need. I would say on average during the week, I might have a 5 to 10% need to be social. She has close to zero, but she's fine tagging along. So if there were any teething problems, it was learning to live with someone and their quirks, not necessarily learning how to navigate a woman or get over arguments and things. We talk all the time. So there's always clarification of points of view and understanding each other, because we always it's been a long time since we decided, yeah, you're the person for me and I trust you enough to move in and all of that sort of stuff. That's in the past, and we've already set the course for all of that it's set in stone. So that's the honeymoon period is well and truly over a long time ago. And I'm kind of like you. Before I met her, I've said on this stream and on this channel, it was during the start of, all of the restrictions out there in the world. Dad passed away during that time too, not related to that, but all of that happened. The world changed and my world changed. And I had this moment, a really big turning point, where I was no longer going to be the person and do the same things again and be beholden to the same stupid impulses that afterwards I would kick myself and say, that happened again. Same kind of result with a girl. I vowed after Dad passed away, I was going to be 100% honest with myself and not lie to myself. And I just got off dating. I was going to be fine with my family, friends, social life, and I wasn't going to look for a girlfriend anymore. I was done looking. I put that away. I locked the cupboard. And this happened organically. This could have as likely not happened, Karu. And I would have been fine with it if this didn't come my way, and I wasn't also able to recognize that this was very different from my past because of the mindset and the intent I had. This wouldn't have happened. So there was the luck of her crossing my path platonically, and it staying there and growing into something where we were both open and honest enough to communicate what we were feeling as it was growing. You know what I mean? And so that all kind of led into this. Now, the peculiar quirks you're talking about, we've mentioned how she doesn't react like the women I'm used to reacting. We joke about her, like for instance, Karu and I were both laughing about the fact that if I go to bed late, she doesn't get annoyed that I wake her up, or if I go to the bathroom, that either of us get annoyed that the other person's disturbing our sleep. She actually likes it and finds it comforting, and so do I. And Karu, you've mentioned to me that you find that very alien, and so did I before I met her. Past girlfriends would annoy me if they disturbed my sleep mildly, but they would really get annoyed if I shifted in bed or did, left the toothbrush the wrong way or was late 5 minutes or something. And that's the big difference that I can't really explain other than compatibility and communication right from the beginning that earned this level of ease, and we don't sweat anything small. It doesn't even register.
Yeah, well, I understand everything you said ideologically. It's like somebody that watches manosphere content and thinks they have the answer to everything. It's easy to understand, it's easy to digest from a message point of view, but it's just so alien and outside of my experience that it just seems a bit like sci-fi.
Mm,
And as you said before, I'm kind of in the same place that you were before you met Stephanie, where I'm fine on my own. I don't need anything. I'm comfortable. Everything is all right, and I can
mm,
just live my life the way I am now, and I'm perfectly at peace. Obviously, you have the comings and goings because I'm a bit younger, and sometimes ideas pop into your head and whatever else. But I quickly put all of those aside because I have just better things to do with my life. But to go back, because I made a couple of notes here with the things that you've said. You mentioned having conversations and the way that we can relate, even though we're different people. I think a lot of it has to do with both your upbringing and the calluses that you've experienced while growing up.
mm-hmm,
I know in a private chat, because now you're streaming, I can insult you in any way, shape, or form, and it's just going to wash off of you like a duck going through water. And
mm,
you've seen cases both on the Discord and in other places where people just can't handle even friendly banter. Well, let's
mm,
not talk about having the rough and tumble that you and I used to have when we were kids, and even Boffin and the older guys out there. Like, you can say anything to them, and they just don't care, or they take it as a joke, or they understand if it's a joke. They have this filter where they understand if something truly is malicious or not, and that's a very important skill to have, both while relating to men and in a relationship, because you can tell if somebody's just being angry and they just say something out of anger that they don't mean. Yeah, they can't take it back, but at least you understand the context of where it comes from. Now,
mm,
to give an example of something that I think you could change or somebody could change just to make it a bit simpler, I'm going to use a very easy example. Uh, for now, I'm a very heavy snorer. I don't know what the problem is. I'm getting some medical tests done to see what the hell is going on. But I know that in a potential relationship, if I continue snoring the way that I do, that is definitely going to be a problem. Nobody can sleep next to two rooms if I'm in the house. I just keep everybody up. Now there's definitely a problem going on there, and I know that if I get that fixed, even though it's not something personal, it's not about my personality, it's still going to improve the relationship. The same with orderliness and everything else. And by what you've described, it just seems that you found someone, I don't want to say that's low maintenance, but that fits well enough within your lifestyle that the things that you do don't really impose a lot of stress onto her and vice versa. Because you said you feel the need to maybe socialize 5 or 10% and she's at zero. Well, that's not a very big variation if you want to use numbers. It's
sure,
still in the
yeah.
same ballpark. Yeah, eventually you might reach a point where you feel like, okay, I need to go outside. And maybe if you're at 20 to 30%, then maybe you would have appreciated, for example, if she was a bit more outgoing. Okay, maybe if she's at 10%, it would be an improvement with both of us.
Mm. Well,
Uh,
also, let's not forget it depends on mood. There's some weeks, all of us, our temperament isn't fixed. Like some weeks we feel very motivated, or some days we do, some days we don't. Some days I feel much more like getting out of the house, and I can't expect her to sort of be connected like Wi-Fi to me and feel exactly the same way. So we have to also acknowledge that each of us feel differently from day to day. Yeah, there's a baseline. There's some days that I feel probably 40% outgoing, but I think on average, there's that difference, no more than a 10% difference in wanting to sort of be social as opposed to her. And those are some of the, if you want to talk about the only things we found that we could improve, it was related to that, because everything else it's very easy. And she is low maintenance, and she wouldn't be offended by that as well. She's very realistic. She knows who she is. And as such, it made me feel more comfortable in knowing how I feel about someone who knows who they are and knows how to communicate. The vagary of the inability for people to express themselves, pretend to be better than who they are, all of that bullshit, that contributes to the walking on eggshells. There's virtually none, because she's just funnily enough, I felt more and more comfortable and closer to her because she was unromantically direct to me and very platonic. And even when we were starting to flirt, it was matter of fact. It wasn't tiptoeing. It wasn't, signs and subtlety. It was just matter of fact. And that matter of factness contributes to a lot of the compatibility. Now, she might have just been the same direct person, but we wanted different things out of life, and we weren't compatible. So I'm not saying that just communication. And I want to touch on something that I know we've talked about that people will presume, and it has been mentioned that, people will think, oh, well, humans found a unicorn. For me, there's a difference between unicorn and luck. And I know that I was lucky to come across her, but if you are determined to think that women are mythical unicorns, i.e. they don't exist, and you're believing in a myth that does not exist, then you will get the results of that kind of thinking. It will be that much harder, if not impossible. Whereas if you're realistic and say, well, okay, the majority of Western women, the women I've dealt with, I've had enough. Most of them are just trash for me. They really are. They're terrible. But if someone sort of says, well, not every woman is terrible, or you get along with some women, don't you? And you say, yeah. And what kind of personalities and stuff? Well, this and this, and my mother has a part of a personality that I would really appreciate in a partner, or even just a friend, even a male friend. And if you're just kind of realistic about what works, when you get the luck of someone crossing your path, then you can see them with an objective lens of what you value, rather than a defensive one of all women or unicorns. So I think the language by which you define these things, like I said, I got sick of most of the women out there, and I knew that I wasn't compatible and I didn't care anymore. But I also knew that I'm not going to turn all of them into unicorns and devils just so if I was it's kind of like being an alcoholic and you want to wipe alcohol off the face of the earth. I wanted to be realistic about who I was and where my shortcomings were and where my Achilles heel was. So I know I veered off topic a little bit, but I really think the initial foundations and the way we started, our honeymoon period was very unromantic, and it didn't start with the intent of dating, but both of us were very matter of fact and practical, and we started off as really good friends, and so a lot of that trust developed in friendship, and the trust, the non-game playing, the non-PUA style, what women want, and when women give you this sign, it means X, Y, and Z. None of that. I don't care about what works for women with Stephanie. I just care about what worked with her, who she was, what she says, the lack of contradiction with her consistency. Like I really, like, what women want never factored in with her. It didn't. It may have very initially when she crossed my path in an instant to show the difference between her and other women, and then to stay and investigate and have enough time and let her kind of grow onto me without all the romantic pretext. But I think the initial thing of the way it was a slow burn, it didn't start with the intent of dating. We're very direct. We talk all the time. And I said this to you, that I think communication between us keeps everything consistent and reminding us that's the default mode of taking care of us through conversation, keeping our word, saying what we mean, things like that. There's no separation. There's no my life and her life, just because of the communication that lubricates our relationship.
Well, since you mentioned unicorns, I understand that there's a natural skepticism there. It comes with the territory, especially considering what a limited intellectual space the manosphere has become in the past couple of years. I mean, you need to look no further than the darker parts of it, and you'll immediately realize that it's no longer about thinking. It's no longer about trying to give people tools and skills with which to navigate the world. It just became a reality TV show. But going back to something you said, because it was something I wanted to touch on as well, you mentioned that you can't be connected to her like Wi-Fi all of the time. And the way you described your relationship growing, I think that the way that you've met and communicated put a bit of a glass wall between the two of you where you could just see each other. And because you didn't have that close proximity, it gave you a bit of a filter with which you could truly be direct with one another. Maybe you could even say things that otherwise face to face wouldn't have been as comfortable, precisely because of the distance that you had between the two of you. And it brought a bit of a willingness to cooperate and to be sincere. So even things that would be slightly offensive or uncomfortable would be easier to communicate. And that definitely builds trust, because even though I'm not in front of you, I can still kind of gauge your reaction. Oh, he didn't get mad when I said this. Maybe I can push this a bit further. And if this is the most, then this is the maximum level of confrontation that I have within myself, I know I can be comfortable with anything that I say, and it will never be taken the wrong way, or I'll never have an overreaction. So I think that online time that you spent with one another definitely was a boon. And not only that, because you also had that distance, and James Sexton talked about this, and I think it's a very, very important thing when it comes to relationships. You preserved both the I, and she preserved the her. You didn't work together as a couple with the distance that you had between yourselves. She could really understand you as a person and what makes you tick. And now, even though she's moved in, she knows you well enough and understands that you need your you time. You're not trying to push the relationship as now you're umbilically linked to one another and everything you need to do together. She gives you your space, you give her her space, and then when you come together, it's a type of dynamic. Oh, we've missed each other, and now we can be together and we can be happy, and then we can both go do our own thing. It's more of a flourishing rather than a competition, where she needs to be the best partner, the best conversationalist, the best person with which you can go to the gym and everything else. And the way that you've described it, there's also a bit of independence that both of you have. It's not like one of you is completely dependent on the other. Yeah, you may be a better cook than she is, or vice versa, but at the same time, she can still cook a meal for herself. She's not completely dependent on you. So there's never that fear of loss when it comes to one another.
Yeah, I would, if I understood what you said, I would sort of disagree a bit with the giving each other space and stuff. I think that one of the compatible things, not just with what we want in life and how we live, but we really discovered through our talking initially, and that is true what you said. We only had the conversation of speaking with each other because during the restrictions, neither of us could fly to be with each other. So for almost a year, all we had was a test of personality and if that would sustain us. And so, yeah, that is definitely a factor. And I'm not suggesting that this is the one true way, but it is definitely a challenge. And I would say, I mean, if you date normally, you see a person straight away and you can touch them and you might want to go all the way and feel their body and go to bed and take it to the extreme. That sort of is a lot of pressure now. And then you have to try and work out if you like the personality while getting really deep physically. And those two things can cause friction, whereas they should come one after another in a perfect world, right? You don't want to spend more time with someone that's just the body. But I would say that's akin to someone who's just Tindering and not looking for anything serious. And then they go to bed with someone and they find out they like them. You still need to now be honest with yourself and have the conversation with the person, because otherwise all you're going to do is pretend to be casual while you feel a lot more for that person. So whether it's one way or another, I think the important thing is to always be completely honest. So with us, yeah, we had the benefit of we couldn't travel to see each other. But even when we had the distance, we were both open and honest about when things changed and how we felt. And the other person didn't shame the other person. Obviously one person would have said they felt a certain way or taken a step forward before someone else. And however we talked when we got to know each other, it was always trust. Like there was never a point I said something or I said something that I would wait, most girls react either positively or negatively. It was always acceptance and positive and understanding of where I was coming from. She never got offended at anything. She never saw things a different way. And that's part of what I respect about her and you and other people I get along with. I can talk about my own ideas. I'm not talking about you. I can talk about what I think about ideas. Even I can talk about women. I'm not talking about you. And she can see the difference. Obviously, there's some points where women sort of are self-referential and they just want to clarify, but I'm not like that. And I'll say, yeah, I'm not talking about you. And they're fine with it. But most women I've been around, the moment you talk about relationships or women, because you want to, like, I want to talk about that so I understand you in that context if I want to be with you. She understood the difference between me talking about what I believe and my values in relation to women and relationships and roles and traditionalism versus this. Do you want kids or not? And what does this mean? And how do you spend your time? And what do you want for the future? It was all very respectful, always trying to understand where I'm coming from. And that makes you want to do the same thing. And that kind of engenders trust as well. So it's not so much a unicorn, it's the luck of who you come across. And as I've said, once you get the luck of who you come across, then it's a conscious choice of yes and no and saying what you feel and not being afraid to be yourself and say those things. So yeah, initial luck, but I really don't think, it's not really unicorn. Unicorn, that phrase, I think is like an absolute phrase that makes people think, I'm not even going to entertain that. So I'm going to kind of lock that away rather than saying it's virtually like it's healthier to say it's virtually impossible out there in the Western world to find a reasonable woman. That's a more accurate one. But to say women are unicorns or I found a unicorn, I didn't find a unicorn. I was lucky to find someone that I get along with and I'm compatible with. And so a lot of things fell into place. But also, I wasn't so beholden to the church of some pocket of the internet where, some manospherian rules about how women absolutely all are, that when I have the luck of someone that's a little bit different, I don't want to even investigate her because I've got like religious beliefs about women and nothing's going to change that. And it's stupid. Like if you're so intelligent, you know so much about what most women are like, that if you objectively see and feel and converse with someone that's different, and over time, you can trust that they're the same person, you're not going to trust your own eyes, your own instinct. You don't have a sense of self-determined sort of empirical ability to sort of believe and trust what's in front of you, that like, no, I'm not going to trust what I see and experience and the time I spend with someone. I'm going to trust the manosphere. I'm going to trust the rules. I'm going to trust biology. That stuff is informative when it's about women, but when it becomes Jane or Stephanie, that was a foundation to sort of vet that initial point of what she's not, and then investigate the possibilities of going further. So I think guys are so, they're not wrong, because I don't disagree with a lot of the manosphere. I think it's just, I know you're laughing, but I think it's very myopic, and you can convince yourself of absolute safety while not having the courage to investigate luck that's given to you, that comes across your path. And it's your own fault that you absolutely believe that the world is black and white, and you can't trust your own judgment if you get a rare instance where it's different. It's the same as, yes, it's hot in summer, but when you get a freezing cold day, when you get a really weird day, that doesn't swallow the whole. Or you recognize when there's an odd day. I recognize that most women are the same. I recognize that all days in summer are generally hot, but I also recognize when there's an unusually cold day in summer, and I can point that out. And that is the rare instance of, say, Stephanie coming into my life.
Well, I'm going to touch on one thing, and since you mentioned the manosphere, I'm going to ask you the following thing. Considering that all of the knowledge that is being talked about is completely valid, you would assume that for the years that these male spaces have existed on the internet, men would have reached a point where they would have been able to at least play the game properly, or with their vast knowledge of quote-unquote women would be able to manipulate and win at the game of life. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So either they're completely unintelligent, and even though they have access to all of this information, they still can't do anything with it, and they're not successful, or they're wrong. Like, that's not to say that everything that they know you need to throw out. There may be things that are completely valid, but maybe some of the nuances that come into their that filter their way into their mindsets aren't as accurate as they would like them to be. But I think you also wanted to touch on the idea of giving each other space, because then you kind of diverted away from it. You wanted to say something more about that?
Yeah, I think that I've discussed this with her. Part of the comfort that we have is, and I'm sure you and a lot of people who like my content can attest to, that if you think a lot about this stuff philosophically, stoically, about life in general, and I find everyday life and those subjects very interesting. In fact, the most interesting subjects about relating to people, relationships, why I could never get it to work. You know, I'm a fairly intelligent guy. Why am I always stumbling around this? I can work out other things like friendships and family fairly easily. But this is always this chimera, this mystery. And I just found with her that when I decided to try my best to lead with my intent of what I talk about, what I know is right, how to date intentionally, then I found a friend where I don't need, yes, you do need time away from your friends, but this is almost like, you know, when you find a friend, it's almost like your brother that you get along with, you can share a room with, you never get sick of. There's such a familiarity, and it might have to do with the way she was brought up too. Her family felt very comfortable to me as well when I met them. And so there's a lot of touch points that are very familiar. And I recognize those things. And we talked about them openly. I didn't keep them in my head. I didn't sort of recognize, take note, and then when I'm away from her, have this interpretation in my head. This was constantly in real time, me noticing something that she said or I saw about her life, her family, and constantly in real time. So I found myself out of my head for the first time in my life with another person of the opposite sex, like someone I was interested in. And I no longer kept this conversation academically and intelligently in here. And I've discussed this with her, and she relayed the same thing. She goes, it's such a relief to be able to get all of this stuff out of your head and be able to discuss it with another version that's seemingly like you. So you no longer have sometimes a bad conversation with the friend in your head. You're always having a productive, well-meaning, supportive conversation with someone outside of your head, and it's never negative. So even on my flat days or her flat days, all she has to do is talk to me, and she feels better and understood and taken care of, and likewise. Whereas when you're on your own, you can have a bad day, and the friend in your head, which is all you've got no one in front of you, it can treat you like shit all day. And you have a bad relationship in your head, but you can't leave your head, your mind. But with us, there's always a well-meaning, supportive, caring conversation coming out. So she is, I can have the same conversation I always had in my head with a physical other person in front of me in a positive way all the time, in an understanding way all the time. That's a very big difference. So in that way, it's not hard to be around them. I don't have to, sometimes when you're having a bad day, like you're feeling depressed or neurotic, you have to kind of unplug and go for a run or be around family. You have to distract yourself. I never have to distract myself with her because she's a supportive voice outside of my head. As such, I don't need space away from her. Why would I need space away from feeling content and calm and good? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I think that I may have, I perhaps may have miscommunicated my point, and I'll phrase it slightly differently. Uh, the base idea that I had was that you fell in love with Stephanie, and Stephanie fell in love with you. You didn't fall in love with the idea of being a couple. There was
No.
no idea of me and human together. It's no, I like human and human like Stephanie. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that you've preserved going forward into the relationship. So when you two are together, it just enhances that feeling. There's no forced situation where the couple comes first because we need to fight for the idea of the couple. It's no, I like human and human likes me, and that's the baseline. From here on out, we can build anything that we want. It's not trying to force our presences in every little minutia of every other's lives.
Yes and no, because I'm just thinking there are times, again, when you as an individual, you might have an off day. You feel neurotic or a bit out of whack. And it's easy for you to retreat into your own individuality, your own solo life. And it happens to me, it happens to her. And we talk about this because she doesn't like being a pressure cooker. She needs to talk to me about it. She doesn't like feeling this way. And I really like that about her. And as such, sometimes you can become selfish like that. What we always talk about is when we're feeling off, not to retreat and try and work it out in your head. Make sure you're always talking to the other person. And if you can't, and if you're in a funk someday or in a moment where you're frustrated, we always say, put the relationship first. That's why I disagree with that point slightly of what you said. We're not trying to defend our individuality. I can be myself around her effortlessly. It's easy. But when there's those rare instances where one of us is off for no reason, and it usually is for no reason, it's you as an individual, you just wake up. Like for me, I'm usually fairly upbeat, motivated. I want to do things. Some days I'm off and I feel it. And I tell her, and I'm saying, I'm just feeling really off today. Like, and I'll be like, yeah, sorry, babe, I this and this, and like, I'm not interested. And we'll laugh about it, but I'm communicating exactly what's going on in here. And in that instance, I lean on the relationship and her, and I kind of just keep communicating. And the same with her. If she's having an off day or a selfish day, or she's kind of not herself, we always say, think of the other person, think of the relationship, and then you're off the hook. So you don't have to reside in that area. So that's where the relationship and the other person, you attach to them like a koala, you know?
Oh, I understand it, but again, it's still in that realm of it being kind of uncanny to me. Like the principle of it, I understand, and it's what I'm striving for as well. If I ever decide to look for a partner, but again, it's like the bed thing. I've never experienced that, or if I did, it was in very short bursts or for very specific things. It's not something that's to be taken for granted, and it's not given to you freely, or it's not something that is just a part of the relationship and it's on autopilot and you can just do it all the time. In a sense, it's it's like these couples online that say that they have problems, but they use their partner as a therapist. And it's clearly not that in your case. It's just giving you the comfort that you need to get you through a slight rough patch because you just, I don't know, woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning, or you're slightly lethargic or whatever else. And yeah, I definitely understand it, and I think we're talking about the same thing.
Let me just, I just got a super chat and a question from someone, and I want your comments on this as well. Let me just pop it up here. It's, where is it? That one. Yes. Victor Von Derp, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. He says, on trusting our instincts, I was blindsided in marriage. My fault for not paying attention. However, I no longer trust my instincts. I've been critically wrong in the past and I'm not sure I'm better. This is interesting. I've mentioned this a fair bit. You not trusting yourself, and I'm not saying you should when you don't. It's, if you don't, you don't. But I remember I didn't trust myself in a way where, you trust your friends, your buddies, your friends in the manosphere, whatever. You trust them over what you see. And I found that I was drifting further into a place I didn't want to be, where I wasn't trusting what I saw. I wasn't trusting when I felt like I should speak up but didn't. I wasn't feeling good about walking on eggshells because this is the thing to do around this person, rather than being honest about, well, this person's lying, or I can't speak to them, or I'm afraid to say something. So the not trusting of your instinct is something that is important to take note of, which you have, Victor. But in my case, I really didn't trust my empiricism as much as I should. I trusted the science, the data, the conversation with my buddies, which was great. But when I went on a date, I couldn't use that and filter it through me and say my words. I was having trouble being me and saying my words. I was trying to recall what to do, or going on the date and being very neutral, and then afterwards analyzing it in post, writing it, talking to guys online like Karu, and then seeing what I think then, rather than being able to do it in real time. And that was the trick. And yeah, if someone betrays you, what can you do? But demoralizing yourself by not trusting yourself, I think, is even worse, because it can seem rational. It's like, well, I did all this stuff and I trusted and it didn't work out. But not trusting your own eyes and experience and trying to do better next time, or trying to be a bit sharper and speak up more and communicate more, and not be complacent and, you start communicating less and start taking them for granted, just like you would take your health for granted. You have moments where your health's going great and you're fit and everything, and you get complacent, you let it drift off, and then your health might betray you. And you say, well, I don't trust my ability with health and eating and stuff. It's one of those things. The loss of trust in yourself, I think, is a big issue. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Karu.
I'm thinking about this question slightly differently than you are. Give me 1 second, because I'm writing something down. Okay. Now, the idea with instinct is that it can be a very good predictor of something, and it can definitely help you in some manner, but it can also sabotage you. And the fundamental human condition is being critically wrong about things. We are wrong about most things in our lives, and we are right about very few things. Even the discussion that we're having now, even though me and Human have a lot of overlap, I may completely miss the mark and misinterpret the way that he's feeling, what he actually means about the topic, even though he's communicating. We're communicating the same language. I have his tone. I have everything available with what he's saying. But the thing that needs to be at the forefront of everyone's mind is that every possible decision that you can make basically dances on an infinity of probability between the good, the utmost good, and the worst way it can turn out, and then you have everything in between. The idea about trusting your instincts isn't necessarily jumping in head first and saying I'm going to do everything I want without a safety net. Just because you know that there's a different possible outcome for something that you can do doesn't necessarily stop you from taking some safety precautions. And the idea of trusting yourself, or not knowing if you're better now, I mean, there's no better predictor than the fact that you already doubt yourself. Nobody's saying don't trust your instincts or trust your instincts, but when you have a decision that you need to make that is important and that you feel good about in some manner, always keep in mind that something can go wrong and have a bit of a safety net. You want to get married, go and get a prenup and get a proper prenup. Yeah, you can feel amazing about the person. It doesn't matter. You still need to look after yourself.
Mm.
And you can do this with every decision in your life. You want to make, and this is not financial advice, but if you want to make investments, don't make investments with the money that you need to spend on your rent. Like, that's not
Yeah.
a good idea. And you can do the same thing with every little decision. Yeah, you made a mistake in the past. Everyone makes mistakes. That's not a the only thing that you should ask yourself, what did I learn from this, and what can I do to never repeat the same mistake again? Or if I do repeat the same mistake again, how can I mitigate it to its smallest possible impact?
Well, yeah, and I would say the sensible things that I think are universal, like taking your time, not being pressured to, where is this relationship going, or going to the next stage, or committing, or getting serious, or moving in, or if you want to start a family, marrying them and having kids and stuff that you do things and take the time whereby if you want something or a certain stage in your life or your relationship, that you've vetted and you're as certain as you can ever be. Like, it's never going to get any more certain, and you're not worried about anything. That's the best you can do, and that's what I talk about, taking recoverable risks. Like, everything worthwhile will take a risk of moving from your current position to something that's a bit shakier and unknown. But the more you've vetted and seen things clearly from every angle, and you want to do it, and you're not pressured. It's not like, she's on sale. You either buy her now or she's going to disappear off the shelf. Not that kind of pressure, but you make the decision comfortably, and you're both on the same page. You've both got the same patience. You both I keep coming back to communication. You don't know what kind of risks you're prepared to take. A lot of times, and some things can appear riskier to certain people. Like, some people have are more comfortable with certain risks than others. But I found that the lubrication of communication, it sounds kind of a bit too poetic, but that sort of like communication between people, I found between me and her, that just ameliorates any insecurity about, well, I needed to sign this, or I need, like, I still don't trust her. Let her, let us keep flying back and forth for the next 5 years, because that's an objective good amount of years for me to know if I can trust this person. You trust them when you do. The thing is, how are you dating and communicating in order to trust it in a way that you trust yourself, that in a way that's you. If you can't speak up, you can't say your yeses and your nos, and you only rely on the structure of it'll take 5 years before I trust anyone, then you're not really having a relationship with Jane. She's always behind the wall of every woman, and you don't want to see her. She can't see you. You never really trust each other. They're never really a best friend, and you need contracts and laws and distance and a lot of time away and living separately and maintaining your individuality. Otherwise, it'll crumble. There's all of this fear and eggshells that you're walking on. So I think the way and the openness and the communication for me was a huge thing. If I had to pick one thing, it was both of our willingness and almost OCD, glee of talking about everything. I talk about everything that's in my head. I'm having a conversation with her all the time now, and so little of the conversation is going on in my head like I used to when I was on my own and thinking about ideas and pondering things and twisting ideas around and philosophizing with my own mind. I'm doing it with her now. And now it's this kind of low-key, interesting organizational thing I do in my head, but it's always coming out of my mouth with her. And that communication is really, I would say it's the one massive umbrella that makes everything easier. The communication let me know who she was, and it wasn't just me feeling who she was or reading the signs or having enough past experience to read her the correct way. No, I made sure, like, I trusted what I saw, felt, and was with, but I also double-checked with consistent communication, seeing that it was always the same and never contradicting themselves. She's the same object as I met in terms of personality. And then with the communication, that just kind of intensifies the trust and the stability of you in relation to this person.
Well, the interesting thing, and this just popped into my mind as you were talking, is that surprisingly enough, I mean, you viewed her as a person, not a problem that needs to be fixed or a checkbox in your life, which is how I see a lot of other channels speaking about these topics.
Yeah, or a wonderful tennis ball to be juggled in as well as other parts of my life. I have her, I have my work, my health, my hobbies, and I want to be able to juggle all of these things really effortlessly. And I hope she doesn't become too heavy. It was never any of that.
Precisely, and you see this throughout your life as well. One of the things that's really interesting about you is that you genuinely show interest in the people that you talk to. It may not be as overt and as direct as other people, but something about you is definitely a will to get to know the people that you're interacting with, and that is something that is usually appreciated by most interlocutors if they actually want to have a conversation. And I think that's missing a lot from our current zeitgeist. It's more of give me the 5 ways that I can get somebody to take their top off. I'm not interested in anything else. And once that's done, they can just leave because there's the door.
Yeah, like give me the 5 things to do, say, or be, where I can, in effect, have a representative show up on a date for me that can get me the job. Like, if it's almost like getting a better person than you or the best version of you with the perfect lines showing up on the date or the job. And then once they get the job, then you don't think about how to keep it going as well. That was something that was talked about, I think, on Stardusk's recent video. And I agree with this, that the manosphere largely doesn't actually tell you, if you have the luck of coming across someone, what to do and how to trust yourself and how to interact with a person, or if you do get into a relationship, how to keep it going. And when you don't, it's easy to sort of say, well, they're all the same and there's nothing you can do and it's always going to fail. If there's absolutely no discussion about what to do once you cross a threshold, whether it's the luck of the person coming in front of you, or you find yourself lucky enough, or even if it's a little bit more than luck, how do you keep it going? How do you keep this thing alive? Is it a lot of work? Or in what way have you gone about socializing or interacting with the world? So there's a lot of being very unromantically direct and pedestrian about this stuff, because yes, I met Stephanie when, you know, she was on the other side of the planet. But if you take that away, the way we got together was very normal, and it was exciting and wonderful for us personally. But if I just described it, it's fairly mundane. It's not an exciting movie. For me, it is, but there's not any of this overly romantic whirlwind stuff that happened. And I'm glad it happened in a very matter-of-fact way that I'm very proud of myself, how I conducted myself. I didn't succumb to anything because no one was pressuring anyone else. Everyone allowed, you know, each party allowed themselves to be who they were and insisted through conversation that the person was always figuratively naked in sort of, you know, growing into each other. And it was kind of that sort of foundation. Now, when I'm with her, when someone says, well, you're still in the honeymoon period, or, you know, things could fail, it's like it is so unrealistic that any of that could happen. Yes, statistically. No.
I'm not letting you do that.
I know you don't like this.
It's not that I don't like it. I mean, you're just pandering to the Spurs, and I'm not going to let you do that now when I'm here. But to go back to something you said, I mean, depending on who you ask, it definitely wasn't a normal way of getting together. I mean, ask Boffin if what you did was normal, and he's going to tell you, well, back in my day, we used to go to the village dance, and we could only see the girls that we were courting on Sunday because they lived 8 miles away, and all we had were our bikes, and that was the only time where we could go and court the woman. I mean, that's the quote unquote trad way that things used to happen, and depending on the people you talk to, it wasn't necessarily a normal relationship, even by modern standards. Like, it wasn't a Tinder thing. It wasn't. I think that it was a bit of a perfect storm, the way that it happened. But to go back to something that you pointed out with Stardust Video, and I think even Boffin posed this question of what does the manosphere teach guys a part of what not to do. It was a question that kind of stopped me in my tracks when you told me about it this morning, because it's been so long until I've seen questions like those asked that it kind of blue screened me for half the day, and I couldn't come up with an answer. I remember that back in the day, manosphere creators also used to make videos about teaching people skills. Even TFM had his Monkeynomics series where he tried to teach people about economics. If I'm remembering correctly, Barbarossa also made a separate channel where he was talking about hydroponics and growing bees and so on and so forth. Stardust made his channel where he was talking about evolutionary biology. Coltane did his own thing with statistics, if I remember correctly, and so on and so forth. So there was definitely a layer of the manosphere where you had this idea of self-improvement and of raising men together to become a better version of themselves. But that doesn't exist anymore. Like, beyond the entertainment that YouTube provides, you really don't see anything besides the most shallow things that somebody can imagine. Like, go to the gym and make money. Like, seriously, yeah, I need to eat, so naturally I need to make money and be more healthy. Like, can you give me any more smooth-brained advice? Like, this is something that a 5-year-old can tell you because they know that the kid next to them is fat. It's not rocket science, and now it's reached a level of guruism for the shallowest type of discourse that I can't appreciate.
Yeah, like the whole the umbrella sphere, or the major sphere of the manosphere now has become just fairly much just PUA. And again, I don't mind what content people like to consume, but when you look at the conversation and the frustration and the butting of heads and the lack of solutions, it's kind of, they just want to debate each other. It seems like there's just such an unrealistic conversation going on, whereas where you pointed out before, even if men wanted to go their own way, there was like, okay, now that you've decided you want to either go monk, date very carefully, whatever it might be, what are you going to do now? So it was a conversation of how are you going about life now, or what are the steps what is your plan for the future? How are you going to be stop going around in circles and pick a direction, and let's have a conversation. And it was a lot of practical conversation. So whether it was Marcus philosophically in a very technical way, talking about subjects that were sort of way beyond most people, it would latch onto that mind. You would have, there was a flavor of person, mind, and conversation for every kind of guy that was frustrated in the unfairness that a lot of guys were experiencing in dating, and the expectations of jobs and things like that, and getting very little and making the decision that's not worth it. Okay, so now what are you going to do? But now it just seems like it all revolves around women. So even the make money, go to the gym, it's peacocking so you can get any woman you want. If you took away women as the prize, I don't think many guys would actually care about going to the gym, being alpha, and making a lot of money. You know, they look at guys like an Andrew Tate who actually cares about competitively having that in his life, having the cars, having the power, the status, and all of that. A lot of the guys look at that and they just want the lifestyle. They would just want the free lifestyle. He doesn't have a free lifestyle, and he likes that. So the perspective by which guys are attracted to and following it, they're not really looking at who they are and if they could reside in that space. So again, it comes back to, for me, pair it back to a very everyday realization of who you are, what you really want. You know, is good enough good enough? Or do you have to climb Everest for you to feel like you can pat yourself on the back and feel like you've succeeded in anything? And many guys are just like packing themselves for an ascent to the summit of Everest without even, it feels like they're forced to, because they can't see any other way out. It's the only way they're going to be noticed or get any girl is if they climb Everest, you know, create this map to climb Everest. And that's the only way they'll be mildly happy. And if you try and tell them as like, you don't need to do that. Like, what do you want? Well, I don't know what I want, but I can't help listening to this and this channel that tell me to keep climbing Everest. And there's nothing you can do with people like that. If I can't take them away from their addictions and their favorite entertainment, then they're just going to be influenced by that more and more. You are the product of not just the people you hang around with the most, that you're addicted to hanging around with the most. You're also the product of the entertainment and the information and the videos that you choose to hang around with. And you can sort of make very intelligent excuses and say, oh, well, it's just fun, I'm entertaining myself. But you can tell by the way you talk to some of these guys that are frustrated with women in the world and jobs, that it's not just entertainment. Like the frustration is bleeding into your life and into your vocabulary.
Well, what was the idiom? You're the median of the two people you hang around with the most. I think it's even worse with content, because people really like to consume trash nowadays.
I think it's the five people you associate with the most form your views and your personality and who you are, something like that.
Oh yeah, so yeah, something similar. I mean, it's the same idea ultimately, but one of the things that frustrates me with the entire ideology is that it seems that a lot of men, and we're talking now about a very specific subset of the manosphere. I don't think that they necessarily have a lot of overlap with your channel. It just seems that a large part of them are just blind. Because when you talk about going to the gym and making money, you even said it yourself, is that, oh, you go out there and you attract all the women. Well, that's not true. It isn't, because all you have to do is go in a shopping mall, sit on a bench for 5 minutes, and you're going to see normal people walking around with normal people. Sometimes you're going to see attractive girls with fat guys. You're going to see really good-looking guys with ugly girls, and anything in between. Yeah, on average, they kind of fit each other, because even though I'm a bit iffy about bringing statistics into it, yeah, people that are around the same type of attractiveness are going to be together. But you go out there and you see everything in between, not necessarily a direct reflection of the stats that you read. And it's just unrealistic to try to say that you're going to do these 2 or 3 things and they're going to give you everything that you want. Yeah, they're going to slightly tilt things in your favor. If you look better, you're going to have a bit of a better time getting the foot in, getting your foot in the door. But if you can't communicate, look, I don't know, to take somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger at his peak. If he walks up to a girl and his breath smells like he just ate a dead raccoon, I don't think he's going to impress a lot of people. Or if he starts talking like a bumbling idiot, that's not going to help him either. So there's a limit to how much money and looking good can carry you. You need to have a little bit of everything, because that's what's going to take you to the next level. It's the same when you talk about exceptionally boring people that never do anything. Well, unless you find someone that's like you and that likes to do the same things and lays around, on average, you're not going to be a fun incentive for any potential partner that you have around you. Like, what can you really do? What value do you bring? And it's a genuine question, and I don't mean a value in the sense of what are you giving me for free? Like, what can we do to relate to each other? I mean, that type of value. Can we go dancing? Can we go do, I don't know, skiing? Do you like going into the mountains? Do you like hiking? Do you like anything, any of the other things that I enjoy? And if the answer is no, well, what do you expect then? No amount of muscles and money is going to carry you through that, because eventually people are going to get bored of you because you're just a boring person.
Yeah, I think people, it's easy to be very black and white and go to the extremes and say, well, the only way I'll get a woman today is to be a version of Andrew Tate. Otherwise, I want her to love me for being a zero and be a hollow, uninteresting person. Basically, I want her to love an NPC. I want her to kind of, like in the video game sense, focus on that tiny dot of a person on the horizon that's nothing, and focus on me and love me to the exclusion of the entire video game for no good reason at all, because I feel like I'm special. So it's not that you need to be rich and powerful, but to be interesting in a way that you can express yourself. Your interestingness will come out because you're not afraid to speak. They will see who you are and they want to be around someone who's interesting. Like your friends, I'm pretty sure they're not rich, powerful, and like they don't have this great status, but you like being around them. You want them as your friends for your whole life. And I think this binary, I have to be highly financially and hierarchically, like in terms of my status, successful, or I'm an absolute nothing, and a woman can only love 1 or 2 things, and if I can't be one, I want her to love me for being almost invisible. It's not realistic. The only way you can find out if a friend is good for you as well is if you open your mouth and you just have commonalities and interests, and you start forming a glue between you based on those values and interests and things like that. But if you don't even communicate, this is why I keep coming back to talking and having the courage to just say your thoughts and things like that. You get over that hurdle, so much is easier for you. You feel less loss by a chick not wanting to be around you because you yourself felt awkward, or you understood why you or her didn't feel great. There wasn't any commonality that you could sort of connect via discussion. If it's just looks, if it's only via what you see, which is the way most people date, then I can see why you have problems and why you find it hard just to trust the window dressing of somebody and believe they are what you interpret in your head. But through the action of discussion and conversation and being curious, which is an important point. I think Crummy VCR, I want to put up his comment. He says, human is a naturally curious person, unlike all the NPCs out there. Now, I wanted to put this up because I am naturally curious, but it's that the ability to be curious that lets you speak and ask questions. Thereby, the result is that you find out, you get a better sense of who's in front of you and what you're interpreting. But if you don't talk and you walk on eggshells and you just don't want the pretty image of the chick in front of you to leave, you will act and quack like a duck and fake everything just so the image won't leave. But if the only way the image can be real or mean anything to you is that she's full of personality, that you insist via your curiosity and your speech and your questions, that's forming a foundation. That's learning to trust an actual person with substance and values and a life and a history and thoughts and things like that. Rather than, I just feel like a lot of people are manufacturing relationships just with their eyes.
Well, and think about it from a different perspective. Curiosity isn't necessarily going to save you. The thing that's fundamentally forgotten a lot of the times is that you're not interacting with NPCs. You're interacting with other people. Yeah, they have a lot of things in common, but on average, people like to interact with other people. So if you look at the qualities that you appreciate in your friends, if you look at the qualities that you appreciate in your partner, chances are that they want to see the same things in you. And if you're a person that lacks those things, like what's the reason for them to keep you around? That there's absolutely none, because all you have are faults.
Mm. Look, I'm sure, I'm thinking of an analogy, like I'm sure there's a lot of people that might like listening to me or watching my videos. But if you don't enjoy conversing back, not just to me, but if you're always being passively entertained by these things, you're probably going to go on dates as a passive kind of person, wanting it to work out without any input from you, without you revealing anything, without you saying anything. And it's a similarity between someone who watches sport or someone who wants to play sport as well. So you can be technically, you know, every player that you're watching a football game about, you know, the statistics, you know, where they grew up. You can get frustrated at watching the game, but it's a very different experience if you actually got the football and kicked it around with your friend, even if you're not playing professionally. Even if you're not a dating guru, you improve your life by not just being a spectator of the sport, but trying to play it a bit, even if you fumble around and kick the ball around, which I always kind of instinctually knew that this information needed to be translated, and I needed to touch grass with a lot of these theories and things I believed in, because then I would really believe in them because they happened to me or didn't, or they worked or they didn't, or I could open my mouth up or I couldn't. Why? You know, that's the reality. That's my life. That's why it didn't work with Jane. It had very little to do with biology and women. So that's the crossing point for me. I keep coming back to communication, and I'm naturally that way, and I'm curious. And let's not forget also, I'm talking a lot today. Let's not forget also that it is virtually impossible to be angry, closed off, and bitter if you're curious. You can't be. If you're curious, you're more likely to ask questions, you're more likely to be talkative, and you're more likely to let your guard down if you're curious. But if you're not curious, none of that will happen.
And you're also more likely to be annoying, depending on how many questions you ask. But I
it
understand.
Depends on how you ask them. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can imagine how I was probably on dates with someone, my enthusiasm and the amount, how talkative I was. But I refused to restrain myself as long as I was enjoying myself in this way, because I figured someone that's a match for me in the ballpark of finding me compatible and interesting will find this refreshing and interesting. I don't want to formalize myself for the girl. I'll be polite, but I want to show up as much as the friend that they can potentially have, the guy that will always be himself, you know?
I definitely understand that. But the other thing that I wanted to point out with everything you said is that the most important aspect that you can have is experience. You can want to communicate, you can be curious, you can have all of these things, but if you never express them, you never put them into practice, you never have any legwork, they're all useless. It doesn't matter how curious you are if you've never opened a book. It doesn't matter how much you read a math manual if you never sit down and do any exercises and get the experience. Yeah, you can recite the theory by heart, but if you can't physically add 1 + 1 on paper and get 2, all of your experience is useless. It's just, you can just call it anything else at that point. You can call it fiction.
Yeah, but do you necessarily believe, I mean, I know that most people, the majority of people, learn and get better and make less and less mistakes via experience. There's also the case that you can learn by the mistakes of others, and you can observe and be a bit more mature with what you're doing as well. So it's not black and white. So some young guy who is being very reasonable and careful and still trying to be as real and open in his life, I think will still do better than the person that is lazily saying, well, you know, women are like this and I don't know what's going on, and crossing their fingers and thinking that everything is luck. I think the person that just relies on luck and they have no voice and no power and their experience doesn't mean anything. You know, what happened yesterday, I went out with a stripper. I didn't care. I didn't care about the signs. I was just driven on hormones and feelings. It ended, you know, that's the way it goes. Women, what do? Let's just fumble around until I fall into another relationship hormonally, and let's just hope this one works out. So
Well, both.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I was trailing off, so it's kind of finished. So go ahead.
Well, both of them have their advantages, because you mentioned learning through experience and learning through other people's mistakes. And arguably, the more intelligent of the bunch do the latter rather than the first. But in looking at those two separately, the guy that makes mistakes through experience, he's going to have a way bigger chip on his shoulder than the guy that learns through others' mistakes, because they're the ones that go through the fire. They're the ones that are likely to be more extreme. They're the ones that are more likely to like radical solutions to problems, while the guy in the second camp is a lot more detached. But here comes the question of, out of the two, which one can you trust more when it comes to specific problems? Because I'm not very attached to a lot of the rhetoric of the manosphere, mostly because I was a pretty good guard of myself. I have a pretty good life. On average, I don't make stupid choices, besides maybe having Rocket as a friend. And on the first account, a guy that really goes through the fire, and he really gets screwed either by the system or by multiple women, he has a very legitimate reason to be in the state of mind that he is. Obviously, you can ask the question for how long can you keep being like that, and is it healthy, is it unhealthy, and so on. But if you want to ask for advice, I don't know if the one that learns from somebody's mistakes is better, or the one that actually went through the ring, because both of them have very valid and different perspectives on the topic, and depending on who you're talking to, it's really hard to give an accurate account of anything, because one, you don't know the person that's giving the advice, and two, you don't know the person that's asking for advice. So it's this entire muddied type of situation where, if you're genuinely honest, you can't really trust any of the parties.
Sure, but I think when all things are considered, I'd say if you're a relatively intelligent, sensible person, you're going to trust your own experience more than anything else. So you will trust the traumatic experience you went through if they are lessons, and that will kind of, in a very limbic way, that will pop up and kind of scare you, or like just, you know, come up as a mental snapshot, and you'll be frozen or deterred, rather than just some nice sounding theory that doesn't really kind of spear you. So I think your traumatic past as experience probably is the normal way that people become wiser in their decisions going forward. I think that's much more normal. It's a lot rarer that someone's just naturally wired to be disciplined and sensible and not have to touch the hot stove. I mean, I knew I was that way. I needed to always touch the hot stove for most things, other than the things I could never go back from. So a lot of the pitfalls I didn't fall down with women, for instance, I knew that I can't touch this hot stove because it could go either way, and I really don't know the person. So I'm not touching it, because if I get it wrong, there is no coming back. So until I'm sure I can get it right, or until I find out that this stove is at this temperature, and then I can try and touch it, but I have a minute, like a few seconds to take my hand off, and I'll recover fine after it. I can do that, but not knowing how hot, if it's lava or whatever, and just putting my hand in it. I think some guys are better at that, but I've always had this sense, like you said, that self-protective sense of, I'll touch hot stoves if I really need to know through my own empiricism, but I'm not going to jump out of a plane without a parachute and see what happens and hope that I survive. I've really at least had that barrier.
Yes, but as a viewer, it's obvious which one of the two is more entertaining. And you know which one of the two is going to get more attention and which one is going to get more traction. And then it becomes the only thing that people want to, not necessarily that they want to hear, but it's always the bombastic news that makes it to the front page. And all you're going to hear are the most ridiculous stories out there. Like, nobody's interested in a normal divorce where people just went their way and you just had to pay the lawyer fees and nothing really bad happened. Like, that's boring. Why would you want to listen to that? Nobody wants to listen to a girlfriend that was nice and you just drifted apart eventually, and she went her own way, you went your own way, and that was it. Everybody wants to listen to the story about the girl that almost stabbed you or drugged you up and took you in a graveyard at night and buried you. That's the interesting thing. That's what they want to hear about. And then you get shows like the numerous podcasts on YouTube where you find the most extreme people that, let's be honest, looking at the people that are invited onto the stage, how many of them can you look at and say, well, I can just have a conversation with this person? Not necessarily, I'm interested in her romantically, or she'd be the type of person that I would walk up to and say, hey there, can I buy you a drink? You just look at them and these people wouldn't be on my radar. Oh, maybe they would be for a one-night stand, but beyond that, the second that they open their mouths, it's like, well, you're not the type of individual that I want in my life. We wouldn't be friends. We wouldn't be able to communicate. I wouldn't be able to stand you. And is this the...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was pretty much done.
I was going to say, I think in light of the extremes of entertainment and where people's eyes and attention is, how crazy dating is and how terrible the environment is and the lack of trust. For me, it would be reasonable to say you have to approach dating completely different from that domain. As such, your dating life has to be very matter-of-fact, pedestrian, uninteresting, unbombastic, as you said. That would prove for you to have the success you don't see in the videos and the channels and stuff. So if you're trying to have a calm, successful relationship using all the information, the rhetoric, the discussions going on in the fresh and fit bombastic environment, then you can't actually have that. Logic would tell me you have to move away from the firecracker bombastic conversation and reading signs and alpha male high value female bullshit that's going around. You have to, in the same way, spiritually yourself, they say to kind of really find your own footing is you get boring with yourself, and then you actually find out who you are. Get very minimalistic about it. And I think in the same way, you have to approach dating in a very minimalist, boring way. And boring in a sense of very matter of fact, procedural, without the rose colored glasses, just to approach them like friends. And in so doing, you will see if there's anything there rather than just seeing the long legs and the low cut top, and then cognitive trying to make excuses and game your way around it to keep this going with as much rhetoric and bullshit in your own head as possible. So it's make it as boring as possible.
And more to that, have a bit of openness, because as much as guys like to pretend that they know themselves, they don't really know what they need. Like, there may be things out there that maybe you're not necessarily as open to, that you'll appreciate without even realizing. There's a saying over here, Lord, don't give me what I want, but give me what I need. Because you can want a lot of things in your life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's what's going to keep you going forward.
I put up a comment by Elusive Man. He said, instead of helping men grow as individuals, red pill gurus tell men to become trinkets for women to desire, money and Ken dolls. Women have countless trinkets in their wardrobe. It's true, but again, and a lot of guys are astute enough to recognize that. Every guy will nod, but then how they act is as though they didn't realize it. It's like, I'm still watching bimbos with microphones in front of them talking about high value men and high value women, and those are the prizes I'm still going for, even though they annoy me and I can't trust them. They won't. So it's like, yes, everyone, including me, including the bombastic manosphere channels, we all nod to this and laugh at it and feel good about the realization of what is true. And then at the same token, they won't translate it into the real world and ignore these women and not go on dates and not bed them. It's like, well, I know this. Somehow you feel like just knowing it, you've life hacked it, and now you can actually go and bed these women because you know what they are. It's like, I know what a tiger is. I'm still not going to try and pet it just because I've studied it.
You're not high value enough to pet a tiger, human. You don't know how fun that can be. But to a certain extent, everybody's a trinket. Like, women are on average proud of the men they have, and vice versa. Like, to a certain extent, everybody's a trinket, whether we like to admit it or not. And I actually prefer men to listen to the red pill guru advice, because you're just going to have an endless way of producing carbon copies of one another. And as far as I know, or as far as I recall, the second you have something that's slightly different than the norm, it becomes a scarce resource. So if everybody goes to the gym in a couple of years, the fat guys might be really happy.
Well, that's true. You look at, say, the girl power chicks. All of them, like most women, have either lowercase or uppercase feminist within them. And if every chick is like a very empowered, beautiful, intelligent, perfect woman, and every woman is speaking and acting the same way, then the woman that's humble and a bit less extroverted and colorful, she becomes attractive. Like, just the normal person that likes to hang out becomes a 10 out of 10. And not all of these self-imposed perfect goddesses. Like, they're boring.
Well, it's also what all the past road bros are counting on. It has nothing to do with their personality or Western women being however they like to put them, or any descriptors that they like to add. Most of them are going to Eastern Europe, and they come from Western countries. So just by dint of the economic power that these guys have, they're already at the top of the pecking order in terms of income. If they're just normal ass looking guys, they're already higher up in the hierarchy. They also offer the probability of taking the woman out of the country and having a better life. It has nothing to do with them liking you. They're legitimately viewing you as a trinket and their ticket out of here. It's
Mm.
the same with a white guy in Asia or in Africa. Yeah, you're the scarce resource in that case. There's nothing really special about you.
I think there's a level of control some men feel where because she needs them financially and for safety in that way, they feel a sense of security and control. Like, okay, she needs me to make her feel safe and provide for her. I have a sense of control, and I know what this world is. Whereas if it's about compatibility or people or having the same values, it's kind of a different conversation. It's not a kind of object kind of material. It's not a chess conversation like you're talking about a checkers conversation. That's a lot simpler, and it's very material, and you just have to just make more money or go to the gym more. You don't have to have a human conversation. You don't have to know who you are. You don't have to vet them or understand them under the skin. All you have to understand is my hierarchy is better than the other guys around me, and that's my sense of security for keeping her.
Oh, sure, and don't get me wrong. I don't think that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. I just dislike the fact that they believe that they're actually valuable, and it's just that the Western women don't appreciate them. It's
Mm.
no, on average, you're unlikable. It's just that people over here are more willing to deal with you because of the advantages that you provide. And to me, it's just laughable. Like you didn't magically get a plus 10 charisma just because you moved countries or plus 20 fitness. Like that doesn't happen.
Mm. Well, it also begs the question, like, they're trying to get as rich as possible or trying to be the most jacked guy, so physically or financially, be at the top of the tree, so that but it also begs the question, if you decided not to go to the gym, if you just look like a normal guy or you have a normal job, are you worried about her leaving you? So if her staying is predicated on you pedaling the fastest you can, and the moment you lose your job or you can't go to the gym because you have an operation and you can no longer go to the gym like you were, and the doctor says you're not allowed to, does that shatter her opinion of what your relationship was, and she can no longer be with you? It was literally holding on to an alpha male thread, and if that kind of thread like is dissolved, if it's just you haven't changed, but just all the window dressing around you has changed. If that goes or is not as colorful, I find a lot of people, and it's probably the same with these women, that they have to maintain their perfect figure and they can't gain a kilo or 5, or after a kid, for those who want to have kids, she's worried that, like, I better get myself back in shape. He's only going to give me a window of a few months or something to get
Mm-hmm.
back to what it is. And there's that lack of reality and being fair with a person. And there's nothing wrong with having high standards, but I think a lot of these people have higher standards for someone else than they do for themselves. The standards for themselves they always have is a lot lower, but they expect the understanding of another person and loving them no matter what, just to be on their side. Whereas you've got the alpha male or the high value female on your side, your view, and you really just believe in your permanent status. But their status is, balancing on a pin, and they better keep themselves balanced. Otherwise, I'm out of here.
Yeah, well, who would want to live like that? Would you want to live like that? Definitely not. Having
No.
to constantly walk on eggshells, or being in a type of situation where if this guy leaves me, I lose my ticket to another country or whatever else. But don't try to make it seem like it's better than it is. It's just pure manipulation, and just be honest with it. Like it's fine if that's what you're doing, I'm not going to respect you, and I'm going to call you all types of names, but it just is what it is. You're just manipulating people, and that's it.
I want to read out a few comments. Victor, thanks for the super chat. He says, what the red pill is has changed over time. The new voices encourage game theory with a new label. Old voices like Paul Elam didn't do that. I want to read also another comment, like we went through yours. T-Dog left a comment. He says, in regards to communication, what signs do you look for to determine if someone is being genuine or not? Mine would be if they're open to talking and if they're consistent. And I notice that consistency and that comfort level where they're the same person all the time. Whenever they open their mouths, their values don't change. The perspectives they have don't change. And I like them. And sort of you gain trust about the person over time, who they are. And also you're comfortable with the permanency of them being someone who will continue, who will be because you don't necessarily change over time your core personality. You start to trust the core of someone's personality will be there for the long term. Yes, sometimes your interests change and you want to do this. You got this job, you change your job. You like painting, yeah, you don't like painting anymore. Now you like music. That's different. But getting the sense of someone's permanent personality, as long as they're mentally normal, it goes a long way into trusting that consistency. So again, communication, consistency over time, and not noticing any kind of red flags that pop up in terms of contradicting themselves, or during the dating period, they're quiet, they smile, but then you notice they're different after a few months, or they're nice to you, but they badmouth their workers, or they're always bitching about everything except for you. You know, those things aren't congruent, and you've got to be aware of that. You just can't think that their temperament with you is one way and you're the unicorn, but how they see the world and their family members and their relationships with everything and everyone aside from you, they're Jekyll and Hyde. I think a lot of guys fool themselves. There's no consistency. You know, they're not holistically the same across the board, more or less. Luke Marengo said, to my question why I don't argue with my woman is, he says, because you are both rational, responsible, and mature adults. You have discussions on anything and everything, realized you're both on the same page about many things. Thus, it's much easier to deal with. Should a disagreement arise, you would both handle it accordingly. Yes. And one thing, and I know a lot of guys will shake their head and think I'm fooling myself. One thing that impressed me the most about her character is that she genuinely feels guilt. And I know the majority of women don't. They're mostly not wired to. They evade it. They don't like responsibility on. It's kind of like a biological thing for most women. But she actually feels very uncomfortable if she doesn't own up to, if she's stumbled or said something inappropriate or miscommunicated herself or offended anyone unintentionally. She can't sort of hide it. She's visibly distraught. She kind of goes red a little bit, and I know she wants to talk or get something off her chest. So she's not a game player. So you need to recognize these refreshing things that somebody has apart from the normal circus out there. And then also if they're compatible with you. And obviously that's something that would be compatible, I'd say, with anyone. You know, someone who's able to acknowledge wrongdoing, guilt, feel empathy, be open. So a lot of those things I think anyone would appreciate. But then you've got the lifestyle and values-based stuff that you also need. So it's not easy, but it also helps to be aware of it when you do notice it. And I think a lot of the rhetoric out there just puts blinders on guys and makes them discount what they see and hear. And so even if a good thing came across, they won't even investigate it. And they'll just continue to say, oh, the world is shit. The world is shit. Women are shit. Relationships are shit. It's kind of like, well, if you're only navel gazing all the time and you're not actually observing anything with your experience, then of course it's just the world that you see, that you don't want to look past it. David P, He said, it seems like riding the line between being confident and assertive and being an a-hole is pretty thin. He continues, when you were telling women about the kind of relationship you wanted, did you worry about how they received your message? No, absolutely not. I did much more when I was younger, and that was my problem. Silencing myself and editing myself to make her think the best of me. Even though I knew I'm a relatively decent person, I'm not malicious, I thought that my own opinion, even if there was nothing wrong, it wasn't good enough until it was filtered through her approval. And I think that's natural with guys. I think you didn't have that as much as I did, Karu, but that was something I had to work on to kind of philosophically find my way through. And my channel helped me over the years, but get to the point where I was kind of unapologetically didn't give a crap what someone thought about my opinion if I was proud of my opinion, if it was respectful and there was nothing wrong whatsoever. So if Pumpkin frowned, I didn't care. If Pumpkin cried, I didn't feel any sympathy for her because I had to breathe. I wasn't going to be shamed that I wasn't her. I had every right to exist on a date, in a relationship. My voice exists there between us just as hers does. She's not swallowing all the oxygen in the room, and I started to refuse to let anyone do that. It's kind of like the plane's going down. I have to breathe first before any of you. And it was the same with the woman in front of me. I'm taking the gas mask first, and if you're offended by that, if you're offended by what I say, if I'm not allowed to breathe or exist here, then go find a pet elsewhere.
Yeah, but my way of interacting isn't necessarily good either, because let's be completely honest, I was an asshole. And I dealt with a lot of problems essentially by being an asshole. And that's not good or conducive to anything. And I don't necessarily think that the line between being an a-hole and confident, assertive is a thin line. The difference is with the calm that you have and how much care you put into the thing that you're doing. Like, when you're being an asshole. Like there's if you don't have any backing and you're just doing something to hurt someone, that's when you're that. If you're just going with the flow and you don't really care a lot, or you care about the right things, then you're just being confident and assertive. I don't think it's a hard thing to balance. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you can do the wrong thing and you're going to seem like you're being the a-hole even though you're not. But as long as it's congruent with your values, like I wouldn't pay it much mind, because the people that matter are going to realize what you're actually doing, and that's the important thing.
That's true. I wanted to ask you though on that topic, because I was reflecting on me and Steph. When you have moments where you're being an arsehole but you're enjoying yourself, do you catch yourself and know that you're doing that?
Sometimes I do it on purpose. Sometimes I do it on purpose, and when it's involuntary, I don't think it's involuntary a lot, because my default is to be a nice guy, whether I like to admit it or not. I'm not particularly confrontational. The times when I'm being an asshole is when I'm genuinely trying to push someone's buttons, or when I'm testing someone at the start of an interaction, because I want to get a feel for the type of person that they are. I mean, you've been around me enough, and Boffin and the regulars that we talk to, that I get to a point where I'm no longer acting like that with anyone, because there's no need to. These people have been filtered. I trust them. I know that they can handle a joke. Like there's no need for that anymore. I use it more as like a filtering mechanism. But there are situations in life when you just need to be like that, and then I do it in pride. I enjoy it, and sometimes I do get off to it after.
Yeah, I'm wondering if other people are aware when they're being an arsehole, because some people are proud of it, but some people, I think, by the way they act. They pretend they've done or said nothing wrong. They weren't being an arsehole. They were just being neutral or normal. They weren't being rude. They were just being neutral. Whereas I think that you would be aware if you're being neutral or you're being acerbic.
On average, I am. I mean, if it's accidental, because there have been times when I've done it accidentally, or I've said something that offended somebody without me wanting to, and I'm obviously going to apologize then, because it wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. But if it's intentional, yeah, then I don't really care. I'm doing it with purpose. I don't do it for the fun of it.
Mm. The reason I asked, I was just kind of thinking about Steph and I noticed that with both of us, but especially her, that if she just says something just casually, but it came across in a very blunt or mean way, she'll say, "Oh, that was a bit blunt." She's very self-aware, like with everything she says, if it comes across wrong, and she'll immediately voice it. So she kind of cares about how she's communicating. Whereas I've met a lot of people that are very oblivious. They don't care about other people. They don't hear themselves. They can't observe their own behavior. And I think those are, you either have to be one of their kind of people, or you just don't get along with them. Whereas I would say, I think I tend to get along with a broader range of people because I'm listening to myself. I'm trying to meet someone halfway in personality if I can, if it matches mine, and so on and so forth. You would probably have less of that. So I'm probably more agreeable than you are. So it's just
you
interesting.
definitely are.
Yeah. So I think it's just a difference in someone who's actually aware of how they're acting, or they're so siloed and solipsistic that they don't give a shit. Now, those people won't get taken advantage of, sure, but they're going to have very different problems in their relationships when it's just kind of like a siloed view of, this is my world and I don't give a shit. I use people in relationships, and if it's not my world, you don't exist.
Well, it depends, because it can be a good thing and it can be an absolutely horrible thing. You know, I run my own business, and I obviously can't act in a certain way with my clients, because then I obviously wouldn't have any clients. I've talked about this with Boffin a while back, because we've encountered, when your Discord server was still up, we've encountered some very special individuals, and some of them don't understand it. From time to time, you need to eat a shit sandwich, whether you like it or not, whether it's your fault or not. Sometimes you just need to sit there and take a hit to the head, and that's it. That's life. But at other times, I've seen you be polite, and even the thing you did earlier when I stopped you, like there's no need for that. Like you're being overly accepting of things that you shouldn't, and you're offering explanations to people that you shouldn't for no reason. And it can help you, but at the same time, it can also be detrimental, because somebody like you definitely provides a bridge for conversation when you do things like that, and it makes you it makes you understood to the people around you. And I also appreciate what Stephanie's doing, where she's, oh, that was a bit blunt, or whatever. I should probably try to do that from time to time and say, oh, well, I was joking, or I was just trying to push your buttons, or whatever. It's a good thing to clarify those things from time to time, because if somebody doesn't really know you well, they're never going to understand the way that you interact. Especially if all they have to go after is just your voice. They never see if you give them like a sly smirk, or any other indicator that you're fooling around, or that you're actually trying to get them mad, or anything else.
Well, it's a level of logic as well. If you just encounter someone, say you're on a date or you meet a new friend, you should be aware that this person doesn't know me, so they can't just automatically interpret my kind of humor, or the way in which I speak, and my lines and boundaries, and my personality. So if you're not paying attention to micro expressions in them, if they raise an eyebrow, or you see them a bit uncomfortable, or they're talking and then you say something and then they go silent, if you're not aware of that, you have to be aware of, like, clarifying what you said if it was a bit blunt, or you relaxed a bit where you were talking to them as though they knew you but they don't. I think that's a sign of intelligence and relating to people. And what you said about running your own business, you are constantly exposed to other people that are not you, And so you need to constantly relate to people and build a bridge with the unknown other. And so you give people, you explain yourself, or you communicate a little bit fairly, or clarify. But a lot of these people who are siloed and live just online and stay with mirror images of their religion online, I think they find it hard the less they touch grass with other people and learn the skills of relating and being objective and stepping outside and wondering, like, did you understand me? I hope I wasn't rude. I hope you understood what I said. Those are clarifiers, and those kind of things. I know I'm probably too agreeable, but I think some of my agreeability, when it translates to the way I talk and trying to be flexible and understand the other person, that served me well when I do come across someone I'm compatible with. It lowers the guard. It helps them understand me because I'm extending the first olive branch in trying to be agreeable and understand them. And I'm sure it helped with Stephanie and myself as well.
Well, if you look at, and I'm going to pander a bit to Mr. Sam now. If you look at serial killers, all of them are good communicators. That's the way you get your foot in the door. You need to know how to relate to people. You need to know how to make them enamored with you. You need to know how to push their buttons. That's the way that you attract someone. And that's the way that some figures of the manosphere build their online women businesses. It's the same way. You need to have a level of charm to be able to do that. Now, at the same time, I'm lucky enough to where I don't have to do that, because the type of work that I'm in forces people to do them what I tell them to do. So for me, it's not necessarily about relating to the person. I tell them what they need to do. Otherwise, they get their business shut down or they get fined. So it's a bit of a win-win, because it's a bit compatible with my personality as well. But you still need to have a level of relatability to the business owner that you're talking to, because if he's not going to like you, he's not going to pay you, he's not going to work with you. So you need to know how to be a bit of a, I don't necessarily want to say a slime ball, but you need to know when to lower your head, and you need to know when to be a peacock. And it's nuanced, like with everything in life.
You also have to be aware enough to know that, say you're successful in business or your personal life, other than romantic relationships, you have to be aware enough to know that while it might work in one domain like business, if you're constantly butting your head against the wall and you're tripping over in romantic relationships, you need to be self-aware enough and say, like, well, I can't use that same model here. It might be effortless in my business life, and I've had so many years for it to become second nature, but I can't be that same person on a date, because I will either come off as weird, or I will be dating people like my fucking clients. I will be having the same sort of very frictional, acerbic, mistrusting relationship I do with my clients, because I'm in that mode, and that's the way we relate.
Exactly. That's a very important layer to everything in your life. And this, I think, relates more to the type of personalities that you find in the US, where they tend to either take their ideology or their jobs or their identity or their gender or anything else under the sun, and they tend to make that their personality. And then they try to relate to people either based on their trauma or what they think they are, with the very limited scope with which they define themselves to be. And it is not fun to try to relate to somebody like that. Like, if you were the microphone collector, you'd have a very limited palette of things that you could talk about, and things that you would enjoy. And it seems that for a lot of people, that is their personality. Like, they are their trauma. They're no longer people. They're defined by a small list of things, and anything outside of that is the enemy, or is uncanny, or is anything else. And don't get me wrong, while there are things out there that will rub me the wrong way when I interact with them, or when I hear them, I can still have a level of openness if you find me in the right mental space where I'll talk to anyone. It doesn't matter. And I can get along with them. Like, I can get along with anyone for a couple of hours. I can sit next to anyone for a year in class. It's like spending a bit of time with somebody next to me that I don't necessarily like. There doesn't need to be this constant antagonism going on in your mind where everybody is your enemy, because it just stresses you out for no reason. And ultimately, what do they have to do with me? Like, they're irrelevant to my life.
Yeah. Look, and in terms of self-awareness as well, I refuse to change my personality just to defend myself against the myopic way I was dating. Like I like my openness because at least initially I enjoy the conversations, the curiosity, the people my openness lets in, but all I had to do was know when to cut it off, know the limits to my openness and who to keep extending it to and who not to and how far. And relating to your business world where it's effortless and you're very skilled and you don't have to really adjust anything. Think about people who are like, well, I'm a great business person or I'm really great in this domain, but they're having problems in their relationship. How many people in your business world would you ever invite home? You know, how many would you hang out with on the weekend? If it's none, but you're really comfortable in the business world, that actually is showing you that you need to have a different perspective and a different mode and a different blueprint and script for relating to people as friends and lovers and, you know, your social life. Because I know that like there's virtually no one from my work environments ever that stepped foot in my house. They were great colleagues and I was friends with them. Maybe one, they've stepped into my house where we drove past, I needed to pick something up and I said, do you want to come in while I grab something? But they were never someone I habitually hung out with after work. Yet people assume that if I'm good in a business sense or I'm good in this kind of pickup sense, which is also a business mentality, I can foist that on a date. And it's no. You being a friendly, open human being is very different from the success you can get in the business world.
Well, think about the pickup artist, and I lost my point. Like there are a lot of things that you can do to relate to people, but they don't necessarily translate well to anything else. Like you can be a great artist. That doesn't make you a good communicator. You can be a good public speaker. It doesn't mean that. Take people like Simon Hayek or whatever his name is. He's a great public speaker. He can't have a relationship. All the relationships that he had, he destroyed. Those things don't necessarily follow one after the other. If you're a great,
is it Simon Sinek?
Sinek, yeah, there we go. Sorry, I butchered his name. Yeah. That's the guy, yeah. Because he was on a podcast and he talked about all of the problems that he has in relationships and how hard it is for him to be able to relate to women and so on and so forth. Like he's the guy that can be a great friend. Doesn't necessarily make him a good boyfriend or a good lover or a good husband.
Yeah. Great mentor, great, yeah.
Yeah, like the qualities for all of those jobs are very different between one another. Because it's one thing to be a friend that, look, we're friends. I have never seen you in my life face to face, and we can hang around and we can talk for hours. It's another thing to have a wife with the same type of dynamic that you never see.
Yeah. I said to you the other day, it's even the little things that we don't think about. Like if I were to meet you, the fact of you seeing me pay for lunch and get you a coffee and talk to you face to face. And the reality of translating a lot of your theory, you mentioned Simon Sinek, like he knows everything about human dynamics and relationships and he'd be a great mentor and a friend, but he's constantly, I'm saying the more you're in your head with this theory and you never try and practice it and translate it to real life more and more to just kind of, you can't just be exercised in the theory in your head. If it's all compartmentalized in your head and you know everything, but you don't practice anything, you're a very poor practitioner of the theory. All you can do is talk. Go ahead.
It goes back to the example that I brought up before. It doesn't matter how many math manuals you read. If you can't do an equation on a piece of paper, everything that you read is just theory. Like you can just throw it at the wall because you can never put it in practice.
Yeah. And going back to my sports guy on the couch, the experts are the kind of fattest, laziest slobs who are Yodas in the sport they're in, but they couldn't play. That they would be playing the sport on the, yeah, you would. You'd be the fattest guy knowing the most about sport, yet you couldn't touch the sport. Same as a lot of the commentators. There are great commentators. They're fantastic. They're experts in it, but they can't even touch the sport. A child that knows next to nothing about the sport can actually touch and practice the sport better than you can. Think about that. Someone who's never picked up a football could actually enjoy it and play it and touch it more than you can over a lifetime of sitting on your couch and being an expert on it. And again, if you're fine with just the theory, that's fine. But I haven't met too many guys simply by listening to the way they complain about women in the world. I think a lot of the frustration is the lack of bridge between theory and practice, and almost negating the practice because of, I don't know, word salad.
Well, but this relates with a conversation that we had at I think a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to add something to it as well. Think about the way that we're engaging when it comes to these topics. We have a minutia when we discuss them to a level that's absolutely irrelevant. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're talking about very mundane things. It doesn't matter if you bring in words like hypergamy or whatever else you want to bring in, because I don't want to pick up the entire manosphere dictionary right now. They're very mundane things that humans have dealt with for thousands and thousands of years. And whether we like it or not, you'll always have a section of the population that's never going to breed. They're never going to date. You're going to have people out there that on average, they're going to be attractive to a vast majority of the population. You're going to have the individuals that are just going to have very normal, mundane lives where they're just going to date 3 people, and one of those 3 people is going to be their wife or husband or whatever else. Like, these are very, very mundane, simple topics. Yet you have this subsection of people that tries to make them seem like they're far more complex than they are, that they require far more intelligence than they usually do. When if on average they just go outside of their house and touch grass and try to relate with people, they wouldn't have even nearly as many problems as they think that they do. Like, just think about the entire black pilosphere, where they try to measure their faces to millimeters and say, well, this is why you can't find someone. And don't get me wrong, there are guys out there that were part of the incel community where they legitimately had problems, and you would take one look at them and it's like, yeah, I understand why you have problems, dude, and you have my sympathy. But now you have average guys acting like it's the end of the world for them, and in the same breath they just never leave the goddamn house. Well, mate, if you don't help yourself and if you don't try to build your luck yourself a bit, you're never going to win at anything. There's a joke over here about a guy that kept praying to God to win the lottery, and he kept doing this for months on end until God finally showed up and he said, you goddamn spurg, go out and buy a ticket. and it's the same thing with these guys. Like, if you never try and pull a ticket, you're never going to create any luck. You're never going to get lucky.
Yeah, the image that popped into my head as you were talking about some of this that we've sort of talked about endlessly in the past is that while it's great to put a microscope over relationships, and this is what the manosphere does, and it's great. When you turn up on a date with a microscope in front of your face, it doesn't fucking work. You know, what you learn with a microscope is one thing, but you turn up on a date with nothing in front of you, no magnifying glass, no microscope, no rule book, no nothing. It's kind of the experience and the forensic nature of looking through that microscope and learning a lot of things that aren't discussed in general chit chat is one thing, and it's interesting, and it gives you like a lot of foundation, a lot of you learn to see the stitches of everything, and that's great. But you have to take your head away from the microscope, because you just have to look with your own eyes and talk with your own mouth, and whatever you've learnt, yeah, it may in the back of your head make you think of something and understand something in relation to the person that's in front of you and work colleagues and things. But turning up to social interactions with a microscope in front of your eyes is kind of analogous to me with all these people with their heads down on the phone, on their phone. It's kind of the same thing. It's no wonder you have problems, because you won't take away your close focus. You can only relate to people from a certain distance. That's where all of this stuff happens.
Well, it's missing the forest for the trees. And to use your thread analogy, ultimately you're looking for a coat. If you're going to try to look at the two threads that are red, it won't matter, because all you're going to see is threads. It doesn't matter if the code actually fits you perfectly, because you're just trying to zoom in on the things that you think are going to bother you. And another thing, because I kept thinking about what you mentioned earlier with Stephanie, and this is something that happened in my life as well. I haven't heard in a very long time the idea of people of growing into love. Like, it's almost as if these guys have never spent enough time around the person to grow to like or to love them. And this is what happened in at least two of my relationships. They weren't the hottest pieces of whatever in the room. They weren't girls that you would look at and immediately fawn over and drool over. But I got to know them a bit, and then I really, really started to like them. And you never hear that anymore. Like, the discussion is preponderantly about people that you just look at and immediately feel this magnetic attraction to.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's very counterproductive, because you're not picking with your big brain. You're picking with your very little brain at that point.
Yeah, look, I entertained a lot of the PUA information, not in trying to get women. Obviously, when I was younger, what words do you open with? What pickup lines? What do I say first to help myself and then be relaxed enough? Because it's like an introduction, right? There's a lot of that nervousness, but it seems like all of the dating gurus have the same rhetoric, where whether it's becoming a high value whatever, it's making yourself into a perfect lightning rod so that lightning will strike you and everything will work out. And it didn't make sense. That kind of magical, extreme way of success, it just intuitively, like, why does it need to be that extreme? I'm a human being looking for another human being that I fit with. And I know it's not that simple, but it's not anywhere near the extreme that these guys are proposing on the internet of becoming someone who's going to climb Everest. Yet that seems as the only way to do it.
But it is that simple. The only reason it isn't simple is because of anxiety and the fact that people care too much. Because if you don't care, you're going to interact with everyone in a genuine fashion. If you don't care about looking like a fool, or if you walk up to someone and you don't give a damn if they're going to throw their drink in your face, it's ultimately irrelevant. And I've gotten to the point where that's my MO. Like, I can't say that I'm one of these guys that goes out and knows every pickup line and can pick up any girl. But because of the interactions that I had through my business, I'm not shy about talking to anyone. Like, I don't care if you're the mayor. I don't care if you're Andrew Tate. Well, I probably would care if you're Andrew Tate, but for different reasons. Again, keeping my kids away from you. But you get the idea. Ultimately, if I go out and I interact with someone, you're just another human. I don't care if you think I'm an idiot. Like, there are 400 other people out there that are going to think I'm not an idiot. Like, your one singular opinion has no leeway on me. It has no relevance to my life. You're not helping me have a better life. You're not paying my bills. If I go home tomorrow, you're not even going to know that I exist. So why do so many guys let all of that anxiety get to them on such a deep level? Like, who cares if some girl thinks that I'm not worth her time? I do not give a damn. Because the people that are worth my time are the people that I'm going to spend time with. oh, maybe I'm going to get along with her. Maybe not. Maybe she's not going to like that I'm talking to her. And the things get so muddied because then you have all of the other factors that come in. Maybe she just had a bad day. Maybe her dog died. Maybe she's not in the mood to get hit on. Maybe she just broke up with her boyfriend. Maybe she had a date and she got stood up. You have so many things that add to the complexity of even just saying a hello to someone, that you can never take any one single interaction as a proper reason to look at and say, well, this is why I don't go out anymore. This is why I don't interact with people, or this is why the world is fucked. Like when
Look,
you get to the point,
go ahead.
Just to finish, when you get to the point where everybody treats you that way, well, then maybe you have a point and there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with the world.
Yeah, most likely it's usually something wrong with you if you feel like, why are you having the problem? Because you should notice that everyone's having the same problem no matter how they're acting. But what did I want to say? Escaped my mind. Don't worry, I forgot it. I want to read a comment, probably, and we should probably wrap up soon. We've been going for quite a while, but it's been good. I always lose track of time when I'm having a good stream. Randall says, do you see discrepancy between you years ago and now? Oh, yeah, of course, a lot. I'm foundationally the same kind of personality, but my beliefs, my fears have minimized. I've adjusted and refined my thinking, my ethics and my morals have adjusted. So yeah, I've changed a fair bit. And a lot of people will say, well, you're being a hypocrite, as though I should be frozen in time. And that's incorrect. I should stay stoically consistent, my views. I should be a snapshot of who I was at 21. I should have known life, who I am at 21, and I should be exactly the same person. And I find that while if I betray people, that's one thing. But if I want to grow and alleviate anxieties and fears and feel better in certain areas of life, and the only way to do that is to really change in significant ways, I don't see how I can do it without upsetting your feelings or your fixed position of me 10 or 15 years ago. I know you have some thoughts on that, Karu.
Oh man, well for me it's a simple answer. It's I would be extremely worried if you didn't see discrepancies. And
Yeah.
the easiest way to look at it is think about the things you liked when you were a kid. You probably would be eating gummy bears all day long if you didn't change.
I would still be building tree forts. I would say to some of these people when they say, oh, well, you said this in a video 5 years ago, human. It's like, I did. But also,
yeah.
I would say, when was your last girlfriend, right? And they would say, oh, well, 2 years ago or something. Okay. Can you take out a Valentine's card and can I read who you said you loved then? And then they go silent. Like, exactly. You were someone different then. You thought a little bit differently. You valued different things. You know, if your core has changed, that's one thing. But if you had certain fixed beliefs or you really believed in something and then you refined them, that's another thing. We didn't love the same person from like who we said we loved and who we said it to, which changes from decade to decade. Who we are, our sense of values change. Hopefully you're not like a manipulative prick who just uses people and keeps changing to manipulate people. But if you're changing to manipulate yourself for the better, that's someone you're proud of, who has less and less anxiety and less trauma as a result of changing, why wouldn't you want people to change in that way?
People change from day to day. They change on a dime toss. They may have a good opinion of someone. They find something that they don't like about them, and instantly their opinion changes. It's as long as the fundamentals don't change, as long as you're still a stand-up human being, like there's a massive amount of variation there that can change. It's just normal. You change with age. You can't do the same things that you did when you were younger. You can't play basketball with the same intensity because otherwise you're going to get injured. Maybe you have to quit it at all. You read different books. You find out new ideas. Like if you didn't have discrepancies, as I said, that's when I'd be really worried. because it means you haven't. There's been no evolution in your life.
Well, the physical thing, you have to adjust physically. So if I want to, say, play basketball or run and stay healthier for longer, I have to adjust how I go to the gym, how much weight I lift, whether I run at a certain speed or adjust it for lower impact for my bones as I get older. So you have to keep adjusting and changing the way you do things, even if you do things that the same thing in and of itself. So it stands to reason that my wanting or hoping for a relationship or being open to it, the way in which I think and go about it has to also change evolutionarily over the course of my life, simply by dint of time and my experience and my thinking. I can't just discount what I went through 10 years ago and pretend every day I'm just reborn with a blank slate.
Look at your drawing. Your style has changed throughout time. Look at the type of people that you like to have around, or the type of women that you appreciated when you were younger, what qualities you appreciated back then, what qualities you appreciate now. Everything is in constant flux.
Well, think about it. It's esoteric, but you and I talk about this quite a lot. You and I both have an appreciation for colognes. I've told you the story when I started getting into it. There was one cologne that when I smelt it, it made me dry rich. I almost had to stop myself from throwing up. It was an awful smell, a repulsive one. And I laughed at the reaction I had to it. It was the only one. And I was interested in collecting fragrances and colognes. And then once I got into it, about a year or so later, I decided to smell it as a sick joke to myself to see if I could, stop the gag reflex. I smelt it and I felt like I was someone different. I felt like, this is actually pretty good. I understand why people love or hate this. I actually love this now. And I started to sniff it and I was surprised I wasn't gagging. Now, what am I supposed to do? Like, no, I have to gag because a year ago I did. Like, I can't notice my own evolution or intrinsic reactions or whatever. It's kind of a bit silly when you make yourself a fixed position so you can count on certainty in that way, where I'm not allowing myself to kind of think in real time now. Like, I like this cologne now. Like, it's no longer a fixed position of the past.
So what you're saying, human, at a very fundamental level, is that you are incapable of maintaining frame, because then you'd have to be rigid all the time.
Yes, I can't maintain frame. I've got the inability to maintain frame. Well, with that, we've been going for a long time, but this has been a really nice conversation. Thanks for making the time, Karu. I know it's probably like 6 a.m. It's like an early morning for you. So there's always like a really bad time difference between you and the streams, but I appreciate you showing up.
Anytime, man.
And like, subscribe, everyone. Show the channel some sort of interactive love. Even give me a thumbs down if you don't appreciate these conversations, you don't like the videos. All YouTube cares about is that you click and look and say something. I don't care. If you want to continue the chat, if you have a microphone, jump on my Gilded server after this stream, and a bunch of us always show up there and have a chat. Give me a little while. I'm going to get up and do a few things, but I might be there in about half an hour or an hour or so. I've got to do a bit of life, and but I'll drop in later if you guys are still there. But if you've got a microphone, show up, and enjoy your weekend. Thanks again to Karu, and I'll catch you in the next video or stream, guys. Later.